Have you ever stopped to wonder what really makes a great role-playing game tick? I mean, it's not just the epic stories or the incredible worlds, right? Deep down, underneath all of that, there's a carefully built engine of rules and numbers. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and really deconstruct the fundamental design principles that bring RPG characters to life. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute heart of the game, that core action loop. Then we'll dissect the anatomy of a hero's attributes. After that, we'll get into the really satisfying cycle of progression, and we'll cap it all off by asking a fascinating question about one of the most common mechanics in all of RPGs. So first up, the heart of the game itself, the core mechanics. And believe it or not, pretty much everything you do in an RPG, whether it's swinging a sword, casting a spell, or trying to persuade a stubborn king, it all boils down to one simple, really elegant loop. And here it is, the secret sauce. You, the player, decide you want to do something. The game then simulates a dice roll behind the scenes, and finally, that roll gets compared to one of your character's attributes. That's it. This simple three-step process is the engine that drives basically every single moment of gameplay. Okay, so what's so cool about this is how it makes that abstract idea totally concrete. For Johnny Rock to succeed here, his dice roll has to be less than or equal to his strength attribute. With a strength of 17, he has a pretty good shot, right? He just needs to roll 17 or less. A higher strength gives him a bigger window for success. It's this beautiful, simple fusion of your character's defined ability and pure chance. Well, that brings us to a really critical question, especially if you're a game designer. Because when you start rolling multiple dice, the odds get a little more complicated than you might think. Let's actually look at the math. And this chart just illustrates it perfectly. This is what's called a bell curve. Getting a 3 or an 18, the absolute lowest or highest you can roll, is incredibly rare. We're talking less than a 1% chance. But rolling something average, like a 10 or 11, super common. This is by design. It ensures that most of the time things go as you'd expect, which makes those rare moments of critical success or epic failure feel truly special. So, if those dice rolls are always being tested against a character's attributes, that means the attributes themselves are the absolute foundation of a hero. They define everything that character can be. So, let's break down what they actually are. Game designers basically split attributes into two main camps. On one side, you have characterization attributes. Think of these as the permanent blueprint of your hero. On the other side, you have status attributes, which reflect their constantly changing state in the world, moment to moment. Characterization attributes are the big ones, the ones you usually set in stone when you first create your character. They represent their raw, innate potential, how strong they are, how smart they are, how persuasive they can be. And you can break these down even further. You'll definitely recognize these categories from classic games like Dungeons & Dragons or Fallout. They really set the standard for decades of games to come. Let's just touch on a couple of the key ones. Right, so the term race is actually a bit of a holdover from the early days of RPGs. A more accurate word would be species. This choice defines your character's fundamental biology. Are they a sturdy dwarf, a nimble elf? And that, in turn, can influence their other abilities. Now, the source material here makes a really important point about modern game design. A character's sex should be a cosmetic choice. It's for role-playing, not for mechanics. You should be able to create a female warrior with the strength of a titan without the game imposing some arbitrary restriction on her. It's all about player freedom. And then you have character classes. You know, the classic fighter, mage, thief. This is a brilliant way to encourage players to specialize and think strategically about building a balanced team. But it can also lead to some kind of funny restrictions, right? Like, you might have this arch wizard who can bend reality, but for some reason isn't allowed to use a simple dagger. But of course, a character isn't just a static sheet of numbers. They grow, they evolve. And that brings us to the power of progression, the system that keeps us all hooked for hundreds of hours. This takes us back to those status attributes, the numbers that are always changing. And of all of them, experience points, or XP, is king. It's the one metric that actually tracks your character's journey from a total novice to an absolute legend. And here it is, one of the single most satisfying loops in all of gaming. You earn XP, you hit that magic number, and boom, level up. You're rewarded with points that you get to spend to permanently improve your core attributes, making you tangibly, measurably more powerful. it feels amazing. Now, while we're talking about status, here's another super important design rule. You should never, ever penalize a character's combat ability just because they're wounded. Why? Because that creates something called a death spiral. The first person to land a good hit gains a massive advantage, and it makes exciting comebacks pretty much impossible. And of course, we have the final piece of the puzzle, cosmetic attributes. As you can see, things like your hairstyle or your outfit don't actually affect your stats, but they are absolutely vital for player expression, for making that character feel like your character. Okay, this brings us to our final section. We're going to step back from the how of all this and ask a really interesting why about a system that we all just kind of take for granted. Seriously, think about it for a second. We already have experience points to measure our growth. So why do practically all RPGs add this extra, kind of artificial layer of levels on top of everything? Well, the answer is basically history. Levels were invented for pen and paper games to make the math and the bookkeeping manageable for a human. But today, a computer could easily track slow, gradual, continuous growth without any of these big, discrete jumps in power. The original reason we have levels is, frankly, obsolete. So, if the original reason is gone, why are they still everywhere? The answer is pure psychology. Levels give us clear goals to work towards. They give us that incredible sense of achievement when we finally ding. They're a super easy way to size up our own power versus an enemy's. They just feel like a tangible reward, and they give us direct control over how our character grows. So in the end, it's a classic game design trade-off. A system of slow, continuous growth would be way more realistic, no question. But the clear, satisfying, punchy feedback loop of leveling up, for most players, it just provides a much higher entertainment value. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As game design continues to evolve, should we move past this? Should we abandon the artificial level up in search of a more seamless, a more truly immersive sense of growth? It's a fascinating question for the future of role-playing games. Thanks for digging into this with me.